At 1423, the USS Abraham Lincoln's Spy-6 radar is tracking 16 inbound Iranian missile contacts when every screen in the Combat Information Center goes dark simultaneously. Not one screen, not a sector. Every screen, every radar, every fire control solution the Aegis combat system has been building for the last 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Gone in the space of 1.3 seconds. The most advanced naval combat system ever built becomes a collection of expensive black monitors in a room full of people who can no longer see the 16 missiles still in air. Time to impact on the nearest contact. 3 minutes and 44 seconds to understand what just happened to the Abraham Lincoln. You need to go back 3 days because what Iran fired at the carrier this afternoon was not the weapon. What Russia activated 90 seconds before those missiles launched, that was the weapon. And the reason nobody in the strike group saw it coming is that only one person had been watching the right frequency on the right bearing for the last 72 hours, and nobody had asked him to. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb is a signals intelligence operator with 17 years of service. The last 6 spent listening to electronic emissions the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. Not for what they say, but for what they mean. Webb does not have the authority to give orders. He does not brief admirals. He sits in a compartment below the Combat Information Center with headphones on and a display full of frequency signatures that most of the officers above him couldn't interpret if their careers depended on it. 3 days ago at 9:14, Webb picked up an emission signature on a frequency he recognized immediately and had no business hearing in this part of the world. The Krasukha-4 is Russia's most advanced ground-based electronic warfare system, a truck-mounted jamming platform capable of blinding airborne radars, suppressing satellite communications, and most critically overwhelming the Spy series radar systems used by U.S. Navy carrier strike groups across a coverage radius of 300 kilometers. NATO has been studying the Krasukha-4 for years. Its frequency signatures are well documented. Its capabilities are well understood. What it was doing on Iranian soil, repositioned from its last known location in western Russia to Iranian in the Zagros Mountains overlooking the Persian Gulf, was not well understood at all because it had never been there before. Webb flagged the contact at 9:17 and sent a report up the chain at 9:31. The report came back at 11:45 with a note that the contact had been logged and would be monitored by the appropriate intelligence channels. Webb read the response, set it aside, and kept listening anyway, because in 17 years of signals intelligence work, he had learned one thing above everything else. A system that has never been somewhere before is never there by accident. For 72 hours, Webb listened to the Krasukha-4 on its surge line in the Zagros Mountains. It was not transmitting. It was not jamming. It was doing nothing that would justify escalating his report beyond the channels that had already logged and forgotten it. It was simply present, waiting, and Webb with no authority and no orders, and no one asking him to spent those 72 hours building a complete picture of its emission profile, the specific frequency signatures it produced, even in standby mode, the power output readings, the antenna orientation data that told him exactly where on that ridge line it was sitting, accurate to within 40 m. He was not building a targeting solution. Nobody had authorized a targeting solution. He was just listening the way he always listened because the Krasukha-4 was there and it shouldn't have been. And that meant something he couldn't yet prove. At 14:09 on the third day, the Iranian missile batteries along the Gulf of Oman coast began their pre-launch sequences. The Abraham Lincoln's Spy-6 radar picked up the fire control emissions at 14:11 and the Combat Information Center window battle stations. The 16 missile contacts appeared on the tactical display at 14:19 as the Iranian salvo launched. Nor anti-ship cruise missiles, sea skimming, subsonic, arriving from 3 different bearings in a coordinated attack pattern the strike group had defeated before. The Aegis system began building intercept solutions. SM-6 interceptors launched from USS Bulkley and USS Mitchell at 14:21. The engagement was running exactly as every drill had prepared the crew to expect. In his compartment below the Combat Information Center, Webb was not watching the Iranian missiles. He was watching the Krasukha-4. Because at 14:19, the moment the Iranian salvo launched, the Krasukha-4 had changed. Not activated, not transmitted, but just changed. A subtle shift in its standby emission profile that Webb had been staring at for 72 hours and recognized in the same second he saw it. The power readings were climbing. The antenna orientation had shifted 4 degrees. The system was spinning up. He picked up the circuit to the Combat Information Center at 14:21 and 33 seconds. The Krasukha on the Zagros ridgeline is about to activate. When it does, it will blind every radar in the formation. You have approximately 90 seconds before it transmits. You need to get the FA-18FS on Combat Air Patrol task to the following coordinates right now. The Tactical Action Officer, Lieutenant Commander James OAE, had 16 Iranian missiles on his display and 4 minutes of intercept solutions running in a Chief Petty Officer on the circuit telling him to ask his Combat Air Patrol aircraft to a mountain in Iran. Who is this? What is your authority for this contact? Webb gave his name, his compartment, and his rate. He had no authority. He said so. He gave the coordinates anyway, and told OAE that in approximately 75 seconds, every screen in the Combat Information Center was going to go dark, and the only way to get them back was to destroy the system on that RGL line before it finished what it was doing. OAE looked at his display. 16 inbound contacts, intercept solutions running clean, everything exactly as it should be. He told Webb to stand by. At 14:23 and 01 seconds, the Krasukha-4 activated. The SPY-6 radar on the Abraham Lincoln lost all contacts in 1.3 seconds. The Aegis fire control system, its solution on 16 simultaneous intercept problems, lost every track simultaneously. The SM-6S, already airborne, lost their uplink guidance. The radar operators stared at blank screens. The tactical action officer stared at a display that had been showing 16 threats and was now showing nothing. 14 minutes and 22 seconds of intercept work gone in 1.3 seconds. In his compartment, Webb was already transmitting not to the Combat Information Center directly, to the tactical frequency used by the 2F/A-18F Super Hornets flying combat air patrol at 28,000 foot northeast of the formation. He had the authority to dot his the same way. He had the authority to build a targeting solution on the Krasukha-4 for 72 hours, which is to say, he had no authority at all. He gave the lead pilot, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Carter, the coordinates, the target description, the RG line orientation, and the words, "The system at these coordinates is what just blinded your ship." 2GBU-31S. Now, Carter had been flying combat air patrol for 2 hours and 11 minutes. He had watched his tactical display go dark 44 seconds ago. He had no orders from the Combat Information Center because the Combat Information Center had no radar picture and was managing a crisis with no information. He had a chief petty officer on the tactical frequency giving him coordinates and a reason that made complete sense given what had just happened to every screen on his display. He rolled in at 14:23 and 51 seconds, 50 seconds after the Krasukha-4 activated, and 2 minutes and 53 seconds before the nearest Iranian missile reached the formation. The GBU-31 Jamie is a 2,000 pounds Jeep's guided weapon with a circular error probable of under 5 m. Carter released 2 from 28,000 feet at 14:24 and 3 seconds. The targeting coordinates came from Webb's 72 hours of mission tracking, accurate to within 40 m on a system that had not moved since he'd arrived on that ridge line 3 days ago. The first bomb impacted at 1,425 and 51 seconds. The second 3 seconds later at 14:25 and 54 seconds. The SPY-6 radar and the Abraham Lincoln came back online. The Aegis system reacquired all remaining missile contacts in 2.1 seconds. 11 Iranian missiles still inbound. 2 minutes and 3 seconds to impact on the nearest contact. The intercept solutions rebuilt automatically from the reacquired tracks and SM-6 interceptors began launching from bulkly and mature in rapid sequence. Working through the priority list, the fire control computer had regenerated in the 2.1 seconds since radar restoration. The first Iranian missile was intercepted at 14:26 and 33 seconds, 8 nautical miles from the formation. The second and third within the next 14 seconds. The engagement ran methodically through the remaining contacts over the next 3 minutes and 17 seconds. The Aegis system working with the focused efficiency of a problem it had been designed to solve and had been interrupted from solving for exactly 2 minutes and 53 seconds. The last contact disappeared from the tactical display at 14:29 and 51 seconds. 11 missiles intercepted. 0 hits, 0 damage, 0 casualties. In the Combat Information Center, Lieutenant Commander OAE stood completely still for approximately 4 seconds while his brain processed what the tactical display was showing him. Then he picked up the circuit to Webb's compartment. "Chief, how long have you been tracking that system?" 72 hours, Webb said, since it showed upon the ridge line. OAE didn't respond to that immediately. Instead, he picked up the circuit to Rear Admiral James Carver in the flag bridge and made his report. "Sir, the radar blackout was caused by a Russian Krasukha-4 electronic warfare system operating from Iranian territory that IT has been destroyed. All missile contacts defeated. No damage to this vessel. And there is a chief petty officer in the signals intelligence compartment you need to talk to." But the engagement was not finished. Because the Krasukha-4 does not operate itself. It requires a crew of trained specialists, Russian electronic warfare operators who had repositioned the system from Western Russia to a RGL line in the Zagros Mountains, set it up, calibrated it, coordinated its activation timing with the Iranian missile launch to the second, and activated it at exactly 14:23 and 01 seconds. When the Abraham Lincoln's intercept solutions were most advanced and most vulnerable to disruption, those operators had been on Iranian soil for 3 days. They had a vehicle. They had a planned extraction route, and they had begun moving the moment the Krasukha-4 activated because activating a system that blinds a U.S. carrier strike group is the kind of action that generates air response. And they had planned their extraction around the assumption that they had at least 8 minutes before anyone could identify their position and act on it. They had 72 hours of Webb's work against them instead. At 14:27, while the last Iranian missiles were still being intercepted, Rear Admiral Carver authorized two BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Abraham Lincoln's vertical launch cells. Target coordinates. The Krasukha-4's position on the Zagros Ridge line provided by Web accurate to within 40 meters. Flight time 9 minutes and 40 seconds. The Russian operator's extraction vehicle had covered 4.1 kilometers of mountain road when a first Tomahawk arrived at 1,436 and 44 seconds. The second impacted 11 seconds later. The ridge line that had housed the Krasukha-4 for 3 days ceased to exist at 1436 and 55 seconds. The extraction vehicle was 4.1 kilometers from where it needed to be and running out of road in every direction that mattered. At 1441, Rear Admiral Carver transmitted his engagement report to Fifth Fleet. Abraham Lincoln engaged coordinated Iranian missile attack, supported by Russian electronic warfare asset operating from Iranian territory. Attack defeated. Russian system destroyed. Operators neutralized. No damage to this vessel. No casualties. Then he added one line that his intelligence officer kept in the final report without changing a word. The attack was detected, tracked, and defeated by one enlisted signals intelligence operator working alone for 72 hours on a contact nobody asked him to watch. Iran fired 16 missiles at the USS Abraham Lincoln with Russian help, and Russia provided the weapon that was supposed to make those missiles unstoppable, a system that could blind the most advanced naval radar in the world at the exact moment it was most needed. The plan was precise. The coordination was professional. The timing was calculated to the second by people who had studied the Abraham Lincoln's defensive systems from satellite imagery for months. It failed because one chief petty officer in a compartment below the Combat Information Center had been listening to the right frequency for 72 hours and nobody had told him to stop. America's response was unforgiving. And the smoking crater on the Zagros Ridge line where the Krasukha-4 used to sit is the answer to every question Moscow is asking itself tonight about whether helping Iran blind an American carrier was worth what came next. Now, because the one variable Russian planners did not account for in months of preparation was the variable that cannot be planned against. The man who keeps listening after everyone else has moved.